Hello, everybody. Make sure you can all hear me nice and clear. So I'm the lead designer here at Venn, and we're just going to, as Luke mentioned, not do a full deep dive into everything design, but kind of give you an insight into why we do some of the things we do when we're coming to recruitment sites, particularly, and a few tips and tricks that will help you along the way with evolving your websites, taking them further, utilizing them and making the most out of them. So starting off, I'll just start off with a nice quote from a UX guru called Jared Spool, which is, "Good design when done well should be invisible." So there's loads of different aspects of design and there's lots of different types of design, but a lot of really great design does go unnoticed because good design is avoiding mistakes and stopping the hindrance that a bad design can do. It's sort of like leaving a bad review on Google. It's only there when there's a bad thing to review. So when we do the designs, we're trying to not surprise users in ways that would stop the flow of them going through the site from wherever they've come through to help them achieve their goals for whatever they've come to the site to do, whether it be to get in contact or join onto a dashboard or look at a position or come in as a candidate or a client. We want to make sure that everybody is included, but that we don't disrupt them along their journey, because that is when things go horribly wrong, and it can happen very easily when we overcomplicate with design. So as there's lots of different designers going from highly creatives, but I would say web designer falls into its own little bracket. So breaking it down, I've got a few things there, which would be a web designer has to be a problem solver, an architect, an observer, a researcher, and an attention seeker. Now, they do all have purposes. Problem solving is the first thing we do whenever we jump onto a call with our clients. When we're doing a discovery, it's not just about, what do you want it to look like? We're trying to find out why you've come to us, because if there wasn't a problem, you wouldn't come to us. Everything would be working fine. So something's not currently happening the way you want it with your site, or you're not getting the conversions you want, or people are going in the wrong direction. So we need to look at that first, and that will give us, 70% of the job is done if we understand the problem. Architect is more structural and content. So we need to look at how we're going to arrange that information on a page, which will best help, again, our users when they come to the site. Observer is that we constantly have to observe from all angles. One is current trends, what's going on with other people's sites, what new things are coming out, what conventions are being created that are out of our hands that we don't want to stray away from, because if we go away from the norm, people don't understand what to do, they get frustrated and they leave. We also need to look at how people are using our websites. That's using things like Hotjar and all these different analytic tools. But if we can observe what they're doing by doing A/B testing or whatever it be, we can look at how people are using it, and then we can tailor the site even more to emphasize the results. Researcher kind of comes off the back of that, which is we're looking at A/B testing, we're looking at competitor research and going down that rule. We can look at usability testing. We're researching what people are doing. By doing that, we can make responses to it, and we can use our design skills and toolbox to create the right results. And then attention seeker, because we are creatives, it's more down to people are really busy in all aspects of life, but when they're sitting there either at work with their tabs open on their desktop, or they're on their phone and they're scrolling, we need to be able to grab their attention as soon as possible and keep it. If we've got loads of information on the page and we haven't done our architectural job, they don't know where to direct their attention to. So if we're trying to get in that 5 minutes of their day when they're scrolling and lead them through a process, we need to grab their attention at each step of the way and lead them in the right direction. Otherwise, we've failed as designers. So taking that into account, there's three main areas that we kind of deal with at Venn. Obviously, web design is the large part, but branding, print, and web or digital are the three sort of hats that we wear. They all come together, but they all have their own individual use. So branding itself, as you can see from the sort of icebergy image on the side, is not just about the logo. That's sort of the thing when people come and say, oh, I need a logo. It's not. You need a whole front of everything. Your branding is your personality, it's your identity, it's, as you said, the vision, the values, the strategy, everything about the company, of how you present yourselves. That is your branding. The colors and the fonts and the logo are visual aspects that can enhance that, but that branding is a whole plethora of things that will run through the different areas, whether it be print or design or digital. So print itself and digital design or web, it does have a little bit of a headbutting scenario. So there are things that we can get away with on print, which we just can't do on web. So print, we can be a lot more visually exploratory or visual superior. We can do more with it. We can throw designs all over the place, and it will come out the printer as we expect it to. But with digital design, it's a little bit more restrictive. We've got to work with code. We've got to work with different browsers, whether it be Google, Safari, Internet Explorer. We have to work with different devices. So tablets and phones, and now phones that fold in half and all the rest. So we have to figure out what I design has to work for every single person, no matter what the device, no matter what their situation, whether that comes down to accessibility points, which we'll touch on a little bit later. But that's where web, we have to be quite strategic when we're designing for a web. There's things that we just have to, there's rules that we have to follow, which we'll get into. But on the point of that is that digital design is more engaging and more interactive. People have to do things with our designs when we're talking web. They're not just going to read it like a pamphlet. We're hoping that they engage with it. So we need to lead them using these little tips and tricks that will help them along the way. And going back to the branding, when we start any website, the three minimums we need, like we can discover the vision, we can discover the personality through conversation, but colors, fonts, and logos, that is something that we would need as three bases that we can go along with and start putting a site together. Fonts go very much with the type of industry you're in. So you wouldn't use the sort of Toys R Us font for, say, a bank or an insurance firm in the same way that you wouldn't do the vice versa. So you have to figure out what the tone is of your site. If you're looking at something that's going to be very friendly and very personable, you might want a more soft rounded font. If you're looking for something quite corporate, you might look at serifs and go for a more traditional route. So they even tell a bit of a story. There's fonts go along with colors, where colors is a whole different world, where you're looking at color theory and emotive color theory, which is a bit subjective, but that's where people say that red can create urgency and create passion, where orange can be energetic and blue can be clinical. I think there's a little bit of interpretation as to who the person using it is, but the color does play a role in what we do with design. If it's used terribly, it can hinder everything, but if it's used correctly, it can guide and lead a client through a whole process. So using those elements, especially color, which we'll go further into, there's what you've probably heard thrown around in some of our discovery calls, which is visual hierarchy. There's a bit of an over-explanatory quote here, but visual hierarchy is ordering elements within a design to help convey the level of importance of the information on display. We're essentially giving visual cues to help guide a user through the design and give subtle hints in how to navigate the information being shown. So what does that mean? It's basically saying we have to go and come back to that attention. We need to look at the information on a page, because we're going to have huge pages with loads of info, and there's going to be images and logos and graphics and sectors. And we need to help somebody who is looking at it on a device or a desktop, and little subconscious cues that will make their eye go from one place to another. It's what if they're going to be skimming, what are they going to take from that one page if they're only going to take one piece of information? If we want someone to really do something like a call to action, like a button that we really want someone to apply now, well, we need to make that stand out amongst the page. It can't fade into the background, or we can't have a title on the left that's more important visually. So there's different things we can do there. Now, visual hierarchy can be broken down into the individual components, like the titles, like the buttons, but it also becomes the bigger picture, the whole page. So if we're looking at coming down a page and you're on the homepage, for example, and you have a campaign where you're really trying to drive traffic, you really want to get, you're on an internal hiring campaign and you want people to join your team, you might want to make that section of the page more visually impactful than the rest. If everything's big bright colors and fireworks and swirly things, then nobody knows where to look and they'll skim over it, or it'll just become one big blur. But if it's a nice guide and then one piece is elevated, I've used this before as a terrible example, but if you're looking at 4 cars on the road, they all look the same. But if you remove one of those cars with a tractor, you notice the tractor. And that is literally what we're doing with design if we do it correctly. We want people to notice certain things and we want to direct their gaze and attention. So using visual hierarchy, I hope this is big enough on people's screens if I'm a little box in the corner, but you can really tailor information. So this is just a little do and don't example of a job listing. On the left, everything's been done incorrectly. It's all condensed, it's not aligned, it's uncomfortable, there's no oomph into what bit you want me to look at. It actually can be quite uncomfortable for a user and people will click off it. It'll increase that bounce rate because it just adds a little bit of anxiety. But on the right, when we just take a couple of minutes to figure out, well, I really want to push that job, that's a higher one. We've seen this technique loads of times on e-commerce websites or SaaS platforms when you can buy your gym membership and you can have the basic, the full, and they want you to buy the middle one. So that's the same sort of thing we're doing here. We're just drawing the eye with design and using some little tips and tricks, but all of a sudden it's a cleaner, more manageable piece of information for the user to digest. Going from that, there are other areas. There's lots and lots of rules of visual hierarchy, but these are just some of the main components. Size and scale, coming back to my weird tractor analogy. There's the one in the middle, which has been designed again and again, but it is true. First you'll read this, then you'll read this, and then this. So you've got to figure out where that information comes from. What do you want them to do? If I was to scroll that page on my phone, I'm going to read that big title that's been given the most visual and impressive piece, and that little bit that says "and this," well, I wouldn't want that to be something of real value because it's probably going to get missed by somebody who's just a little distracted. And then on the right is the similar example from before of just, I want to show the title, I want the apply now and the salary, and then secondary, if somebody wanted to read further, there's a little bit of a snippet to go into the description. Another huge piece that we touched on was color. So if you've got every single color, especially some brands do have this, they have 16 colors in their palette and they're all as bright and dominating as each other, it can be really tricky to use that palette to enhance that journey along the way. So if we knock it back a little bit, even if you've got reds or greens or blues and whatever that might emote, I think the slide on the right there is the perfect way of doing it. We've got 2 buttons there. We've got 2 different uses, and we've got one which is the more primary and one which is the secondary. So by using a little bit of trickery, we can automatically guide that. I really want someone to apply now, and if not, they can knock back and, oh, well, I'm not quite ready to apply, but I will learn more. When people are faced with a decision with design, it's a little psychological thing, is they don't like to. If you put 2 buttons that have the same sort of value, people don't like to choose left or right, and they usually won't. But if you make one more leading, they probably will. It sort of creates a little bit of an urgency, and it's just a little bit more soft on the user. So by doing that, we can take quite a nice page and visually make a few little decisions here and there that will, again, guide the user through one piece of information to the next, tell a whole story, but it also keeps that whole flow going so that we can get all the way through the process into conversion. We wouldn't want to put something next to that apply now button that has more dominance, because all of a sudden we've lost the focus and now they're stuck with a decision. So using that, there's more pieces of the puzzle. There's lots of pieces of the puzzle, and pieces that you'll hear again and again is homepage and landing page. And they can be kind of confused because landing page might be misconstrued as a home page, and we don't really know what those differences are, but they do have completely different uses and they have different use cases, which Sarah will have touched on massively in the SEO portion of her marketing collective last week. But we can use all these tips and tricks and techniques to get completely different outcomes from the two different types of page within your website. So homepage, first of all, every site's got one, and it's only got one. It's the front door to your website. It's the front of the house. It's what's going to give you an idea of what's going on. So they have, as I said, different use cases completely. A homepage would exist solely to be, that open front window with all the different products that you sell. It's got all different purposes, and it's got a variety of goals for different uses. So somebody might come in there to look at your dashboard. They might come in there to read your articles because you've got a really great insight that they've heard about, or you've become a bit of a market leader in the information. They also might want to look at jobs, obviously, or hire as a candidate or as a client. So we want to give everybody that option. Not overwhelmingly so. We will still use some design, and we'll still use some strategic spread out, but we want to cover all bases, starting with visually hierarchy and informational hierarchy. We want to start with the most important. You know, if you're a more candidate-led or client-led, that's going to have a huge impact on how you arrange your information. If you're more candidate-led, you're going to want your job search higher up the page and probably take more focus. So we would use those pieces of information, but we wouldn't ignore the others, which we call edge cases. So somebody might still want to come in and check the status of a role. We give them that option, but it's not the main purpose of every single person coming to your site. Navigationally, we want people to move with your site. We want them to join in. We want them to enjoy being on it, and we want them to go in a different direction depending on what their need. We want people to stay on it, get more information about you, and find out who you are as a brand. We can do that with all of these different pieces of information and different blocks that we sort of involve in our sites, whether it be latest articles or whether it be call to actions to different job boards. But there's all different ways that somebody can spread off a homepage, and the content is informational. It's there to give the user a really good overview of who you are, and hopefully you gel with them and that they will continue that journey along your site. Now, landing pages are standalone. These are accessible through different channels. They could come through the homepage itself, or they could come through Google, or they could come through searches, or they could get shared to you. But it's an area where you've come into that page with a specific purpose. That could be services, it could be industries, it could be any of these different parts. It could be things that you can provide that others can't, but they have a purpose. It's not a stop part of the page. We want people to arrive onto it and go somewhere and do something with it. So we don't want to add as many distractions now. We don't want to go crazy with those design and things. We've got somebody so far, we don't want to lose them now. We've got them hooked. So the purpose of these is to accomplish a specific goal. Navigation wise, we're now going to spread things out a little bit. We're not going to have the opportunity to go off in different news directions and have a look at Meet the Teams. We're going to keep the flow going. So we're going to change what we do. We're going to make more emphasis on what those final pieces are that we want people to do, which will be the buttons, which will be links off, or even straight away, you know, contact form there and there, or a drop a CV. We want somebody to do something with this page. Calls to action, as I said, single or multiple, but with the same objective. Call to actions can be directional, but they can also get people to do something. I, for myself, prefer to pick up the phone and call people. I hate using forms, but some people love using forms because they don't like being on the phone, or they want to email, or they want to drop their CV. But we don't want to ignore all these different pieces. We can get a little bit, oh no, forms are the way to go because I love a form. That's not what everybody does. And sadly, the website isn't for us. We're the ones that are going to use it the least. We need to cover the bases for everybody. So by doing all these different call to actions, but with one objective, we've got more chances of casting that wider net within this landing page and getting the same result. And then again, the content is focused on conversion, which again, we're just going to pull that back through using our tools of whether it be hierarchy or colors, whatever we're doing, focus on that conversion. We've got them this far. What can we do as these little bits here to streamline the process? If we fill it full of everything, we've lost them. We've confused the user. We've put a million buttons on the front of a microwave and all I wanted was one, and I just don't want to do it. I'm not going to. You've added too many options. One thing that we did as a test off this a while ago was, if we've gone all the way through to job details, you've gone through the site, you've come in at the homepage, you've gone to a sector, you've gone to an industry, you've gone to look at the jobs within that role. We are so close to the finish line, but some people are still unsure. And what we would normally do at this case is we used to have, as you've seen on loads of blog pages, on the right-hand side, related jobs. Just by shifting them from the side of the information to the bottom, away out of sight, if somebody wants to scroll and read through all that information and they are still not sure, then give them the option to look further. If somebody's staring at some information with a contact form ready to go and an apply now button, by putting the information on the right, why have we added some doubt? Why have we taken that moment to put it there? And now people, well, hang on, I might just keep looking. You strip it out. We've got them that close. So we don't want to start throwing all different directional things in there, but we can still give them the option, but just put it further down the page. It's not as important as the whole reason, that big apply now button. If we've got huge bits of information, we've even started now putting an apply button at the top with an anchor down to the form, because they might not scroll all the way down. They might just be in a hurry and want to apply. So if we put the form further down, then chance they'll miss it. So we put the apply now at the button at the top. So these are all little design choices led to one goal, and that's conversion. So
Ross,
we kind of,
sorry, Ross, just before you sort of jump onto the best practice of landing pages, could you go back one slide? I had a quick question for you, actually.
How far are we going?
Yeah, that's it, just on the homepage. Thank you, just that one. One of the questions that we see, obviously working within the industry, and you may also be looking at your website now, is you're already starting to try and direct people down the client or the candidate sort of route. You know, you do see it, it's very split. It's like, you are this, you must go this way. You are this, you must go this way, right? What's your sort of take on that, Ross? I mean, obviously you've worked in the industry for a while now, and you've done quite a lot of designs now. How do you tackle that?
A real tricky one. It's a real tricky one when it's a 50-50 split down the middle. What people used to do was have a sort of landing page before the homepage, which was you pick an avenue, but then you've got a whole issue of how does that work on an SEO front. So what we've done recently is, and it's a language, it's older language, but you've probably all heard above the fold. Well, that's where we're going to give an option, because we want to straight away let the user know what we do. So it might be a case of where we've got this nice big sort of hero header section with your big picture and all the rest. Slides. It's so simple, and it's overused, but it's because it works. Slides, you can cover all bases. Now, don't have 15 of them, but you can go left and you can go right. You could also put 2 buttons on there, which would have separate sections. Now, I would still favor in the way of having a primary, but what we can do is using our text, and we'll get onto it a little bit in the SEO side of things. Content obviously backs up what we're doing with the design. It is not the answer of all, as much I wish it was. We have to have content, we have to have context. So by adding the right imagery, by adding the right text to the pieces, you're building the puzzle. So I would say, if you're going to do it, you want dual call to actions, give people an option, but make it very clear that one is for one person, one is another. Back it up with an image of more hireable or candidate led. Have enough focus that you can. It is a really tricky one that we come up again and again, but I think sliders are a really good way to go. They just cover all bases. You can change them as you go. So if you wanted to, you know what, we're actually going to push this a certain way, you just remove the others or change the order. So that's one way of combating it.
Thank you.
Does that hopefully answer?
It does. I mean, hopefully that sort of answers questions for other people as well. If you are looking at your sites and going, how are you doing that? My other question was going to be, this may be a very badly worded question, probably like all of my other questions as well. However, would you say it's almost down to what your strategy is at the time, you know, having the flexibility to change that homepage? If you think about, like, you know, Argos, Boohoo, e-commerce, you know, there's a new homepage, there's a new call to action for every season. You know, is that something that you would suggest doing based on
massively,
you know, what people's I don't know, objectives were for that quarter, that year? How often would you change the homepage and not affect the design, because you still want to keep your brand, top of mind. But
well, the way that we code the site, your brand is going to be included in it anyway. So every single element that you have there, whether it be image and text or cards or whatever it be, they will be branded. So you can move things around. Now, when we design a site, it's right for the time when we design it, but we don't know what the business needs are going to be in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. So we need that site to be evolvable. So by changing it, you're, for one, helping SEO, because Google likes to see sites that are moving, it changes the text, the imagery. It does notice these things. If a site sits stagnant, it will drop to the bottom of the rankings. So that's one real big plus of keeping your site up to date, which we do touch on a little bit at the end. So I think changing things around, which we will go onto it a little bit, but it's a tricky one to navigate, because it's so scary once you've got this nice new website. You don't want to go in there and start moving things around, but that's why we have this sort of modular approach. We can move things higher, we can move things lower. If the candidates do become over the clients for a little bit, you can move around and you can test things. We have the opportunity to A/B test. What happens if I put this slide first? Do I get more conversion? What happens if I do change this to here, or I use this module for something else, or add an extra call to action? It's an experimental thing. It might not work, but it really might as well. It's just by covering all bases and adding extra, you've got to think of the impact. You've got to think of, all of a sudden, is this becoming a yellow pages of everything possible this company can do? Because it's just overwhelming. So do have a little bit of a look back, zoom out at the website and say, have I gone too far here? But you can change websites. That's the whole point of our system. It's why we wanted to make it a little bit more hands-on for our users and clients, because business changes constantly and we need to cover all areas.
Thanks, Ross. That's good. Thank you, buddy.
No worries. So yeah, we did touch on these, but best practices is, desired outcome. So that's what do you want to get out of it? Is it going to be candidate? Is it going to be client? Is it going to be hiring? Because we do, yes, this is recruitment, but career sites, it's a completely different tone of voice. What do you want people to do? You want them to come work. Well, that's going to probably change the whole way I would speak. It depends on what sort of clients you're after. How can we help the user get there? So thinking again of when you zoom out on that page, and if there's one person that's going to land on this page and they're going to do one thing, what is it? Is it go to my meet the team page? Probably not. Is it go to the job search, or is it go to upload a vacancy? It's probably going to be one of those. So what can I do to help them get there? How can I guide that flow? Don't add 1 million clicks. There are pages that we create for SEO. They probably wouldn't arrive in the navigation. We want it to be as minimal clicks as possible to get them there. After 5 clicks, usually people drop off. So what information do they need to complete their objective? That comes down to, it's not as such a design thing, but it's so important. People don't like surprises on a website. If you click something with the intent to go somewhere, don't send them somewhere else. There's an example from so much studies of airline websites. When you go into book a seat and book a flight, and you're getting all the way through, and you go and click that button, and all of a sudden it pops up with a thing, and you've got to charge to add your bag. And if that information was given to me earlier, I would have been able to make a much better decision now. So why is that a surprise coming up? Strip it out, be more transparent, and how can I help it? What information does my person who's come to this website need to fill out their goal? Again, is all the content listed aligned with the goal? If there's information there that you think is wasteful, don't put it. If you think, oh, that's a nice image, but it doesn't add value to this page, really think about it. A bad image versus no image, I'd always take no image. If the information isn't aligned or it can add confusion, strip it out. Keep it simple, go for that. And then that does bring me onto the SEO/designer tug of war. We do have to remember we are not print. We are digital. We have to go against all the other recruiters out there. We need to rank. So coming off the back of Sarah's, we constantly have this thing where I want to do these nice, slick, minimal designs that are leading, but she needs a certain amount of word content and she needs keywords. We have to find a balance. Now, it's a struggle, and we've gone through it, and that's why we've done so much research into this of how to best combat it, because now we're looking at certain pages, we need a minimum of 700 words, That's a lot of text for a website. But we have to put it in one big paragraph. We can split it. We can look at things and go, right, well, again, informationally, I want the title, I want the stats, I want the information, make those bigger, draw the eye, but still get that other information in there. If it's really lots of text, look at using a drop down and accordions so you can hide those essays away. Use a read more button. The text still appears on the page according to Google, but it's not there in the user's face all at one go overwhelmingly. Sliders are a great way of doing it. If you want to add a load of services and you want to add information about each service so that Google knows exactly what service you provide, don't put it all out front. Put it in a nice slider so it's off the page for when the user wants it, because then you're not distracting and they're having to scroll past all of this guff to get to what they actually wanted to do. But if they want to delve into it, they can. The option's there. So that's the sort of tug of war we constantly have. And along with it, there are things that we consider for you, but these are a huge part when we're building a site, is the design itself has to look great, but it also has to function great for all different people. Sites have to be responsive, which I spoke about, from different screen sizes and devices. They need to be mobile friendly. So we're looking at, phones have all of a sudden got really huge. So we don't want to put the most important button right at the top where they've got to stretch their thumb over. We want it close to that little safe zone where people are going to tap. Accessibility is, if somebody's hard of sight and they have a specific screen reader that they've already set up on their computer, we need to know that our websites are going to work with that, which is something that you guys don't need to worry about because we code in an accessibly friendly manner. But it is important in the same way that if we're adding images, we add alt text. If we're going to put text over an image, we don't just, like this photograph here, I wouldn't put a light blue load of text over it because there wouldn't be enough what they call a contrast between the background and the foreground, because then somebody hard of sight won't be able to make it out. Accessibility ranking goes down and Google doesn't like us. So there's all these different things to think about, but we code that in. Minimum word counts, as we touched on, and then calls to action. Think about what you're wanting people to do and lead with that, and then add around it. So start off right at the beginning. Discovery call. It's where all of our sites start, and it's where the journey figures out. When it gets to this, you probably would have met some of our team already. You might have gone through SEO and strategy, and you've probably answered all of these questions before, but we still ask them again. And that's because we're listening for a different part of the answer. When we're asking about, tell us about who your company are, we're listening for those little pieces that might have been missed from a more creative standpoint rather than a strategic. We're trying to find out, like, oh, well, that's quite a nice area. That's the vibe of this company that I can go with. I'm probably going to round the corners now rather than keep them nice and sharp. So these are why we kind of reiterate some of these questions, but it does add so much value to when we're adding the design in. So we've gone over business objectives. What is the main thing? And we will work off that. We will try and figure out how to use our skills to direct your traffic in the right way. Business targets and KPIs, how we can focus on it. So the targets themselves, that's probably going to be looking at conversion. KPIs, we can use the hot jars, we can use these analytic tools to make sure that things are going in the right way. What's unique? Those are the pieces of the puzzle that we're going to make stand out from the rest of the site. That's the visual pieces that really need to be elevated and get a little bit more showtime. Services, obviously it's such a huge part, but we would make design choices again. So if I had a client which had 4 or 5 services, then I can display that quite neatly all together. But if they've got 20, it's going to take a little bit of thinking of how to make that manageable. If I went to a B&Q looking for a screw, they've got millions of items, but I know by looking at 9 aisles which way I'm going to go. It's been broken down into quite manageable chunks, and it's the same thing we're going to do with your services. It's natural grouping. It's what people in the consensus will go with. It's all those pictures that you've seen of user experience researchers with post-it notes on windows. It's grouping. It's going, right, well, that to me looks like that, and then eventually you kind of come up with a bigger picture. We might look at doing service sliders or carousels or accordions with a bit more of a drop down if there's quite a few services involved. How are they being tracked? Again, that's hotjar information. That's looking at all of your different information that would come through on the dashboard. Target audiences and personas. So that is, how can I gel with the people who are on the other end of this? I need to kind of get myself in their shoes and picture them. Now, all clients are going to be different, but there will be a specific audience that you're going towards, and that will tailor the amount of information. If you're thinking about imagery, that is a huge part, and you can change the whole tone of a website with imagery. If I wanted to, what's a good example here? So I think a good way here would be careers websites versus an engineering website. If it's an engineering website, I'm going to give it quite a engineering focused imagery. We're going to have pictures of the sort of work that you're guiding, so that when somebody comes onto it, they feel familiar with it. You feel like they're part of their team and you're going to follow it through. But if I was doing a careers site, I want to show people what it's like to work with us, and it's a nice, relaxed place, and we're a fun bunch to work with. So you would change the imagery completely. But if I swap them round, it would change the tone completely. And that's the same with how we would do all the different parts of the design on the site. Sectors, again, it comes down to imagery. I don't really like to, there's old conventions that we see all the time, and a huge one is recruitment in medical being blue. Like, it's just an old hangover from design theory that doesn't need to be linked in anymore. Every single company that we get to us that does any recruitment within blue, everything's blue, and it just doesn't need to be anymore. We can go around it, but it would still maybe change the imagery. It's going to change the way we talk. It's going to make, if it's sectors in legal, again, I'm not going to use that sort of playful Toys R Us font. Main competitors, we obviously don't want to look at them and copy them, but we need to know what they're doing. We need to see what works and what doesn't. And competitive benchmarking is a huge part of the tool for looking at design. They're setting trends, and they're also doing a lot of the research for us, hopefully. So we can use what they've got and we can elevate it. We can take what they've got and go, you know what, they're kind of there, but they're not there. We can do a much better job. So looking at competitors, seeing how they put themselves within your market, it's a huge part. But at the same time, when we're looking at competitors, we are taking inspiration from websites, but you don't need to look in just your sector. If you work in AI recruitment, you don't just need to look at AI recruitment websites. You could look at anything and go, you know what, this company makes toasters, but for some reason, the way that they present themselves really resonates with the way that our company does. So you can get inspiration from everywhere. It doesn't need to be competitors, and that's a huge part. Brand strategy. Always looking forward. What are we going to do with this company? Is it going to be an evolution? We've companies at the moment we're working with that are introducing new branding. They don't want to go full hell for leather, because then what about our current client base? They might not recognize us. So we're going to drip feed little bits into it. It's like how all of a sudden you look over and a McDonald's is all green and there's no more Ronald McDonald, but they didn't do that overnight. They drip fed it. And that's a huge part of brand strategy. What are you going forward to? And what's it look like in 5 years? You might be set on this, but we do need to future-proof this website. If there's a certain thing that you're thinking about doing, let us know and we can go forward with it. What's worked well in the past? Usually when we get people come to us, they're fed up with the site, nothing works, I hate it. But there probably are some pieces. There's pieces that really frustrate you, but there are pieces that have worked well. Don't get rid of them. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are some really good little nuggets nestled away that you might have gone, you know what, we did this campaign a while ago and it really, really worked. We don't want to lose this part of our website. We don't want to lose this part of our identity just because we're doing a facelift on it. What hasn't worked well? Usually there's a few things that are, these are the pain points, but we just stay away from them. We take inspiration from those areas completely. What do you wish you could do more of? So the old sites that we get, they're usually dated. The information's incorrect now. We've moved further. We don't even work in those sectors anymore. So we want to do more with this. We really want to push this now. So let us know and we will use our skills to guide people towards that more. Key stakeholders, who are we reporting to? Yeah, when we get a lot of people on one call to do a discovery or to do any design presentation, everybody has an opinion. It's a huge part that we can be concerned about. Just because you can't design by committee, have one person that's in charge. And that will always, everybody can have their say, but make sure that one person is the final sayer. That person's usually the most hated in the room, but trust me, it makes the process so much easier when one person is going, you know what? I take everybody on board, but just because somebody likes red, we've got to remember that we're not the ones looking at the website. It's not for us, it's for our users, and this is the way we have gone off the research, and this is what will work. Elevator pitch. Again, we're trying to capture that information, give it a really great idea. So if we can take a nice, clean elevator pitch of a few short sentences and take something off the back of that and turn it into a site, it's a great way to start. We have to create your whole business here and start to consider, as I said, design inspiration from other companies, whether they be similar to your brand, different companies can pull together, and then collate them. So get your assets. That's another one. Get everything together, images that you like, everything that you want to continue over to your new site. Again, we don't need to throw everything out. If you've got logos, we need to have all of those different files from SVGs to PNGs. If we've got certain imagery and headshots, get it all together, and existing content that you want to pull over. Some of the headings might go, but the rest will come through. And then finally, because I'm just keeping an eye on the time, what to do with your new site. Enjoy it, use it, and grow it. Don't let it just sit. So use it, get it out there, get on LinkedIn, post it. We've got this great new site. Look at all these new features that you can do. We want to really push this. If you write a blog, share it across and have the blogs pull back to it, because somebody might come through and then have the links missing. QR codes, if you go down that route. Social media, tag it all back. That will help the SEO boost it. Just because we've built a new website doesn't mean it automatically fires to Google. You have to work with it and help it along the way. There's a lot of sites on the internet that we need to fight against. So by getting us out there, whether you do vlogs or YouTube or podcasts, everything is pointed back to the site. Keeping it fresh, as we spoke about. Don't let it fall behind. Imagery itself is a huge one. It can become very dated. If you look at old stock photos of a person with a clipboard, at one point that was the hot new image, and now it's just the most old school thing. If you're feeling it's looking stagnant, shout up. See, what can we do to keep this fresh? We want this website to evolve with your company. Imagery, as I said, keep it updated. Do not be scared to change it, but do it with remembering that it can have an impact. Imagery is a tricky one to play with, but don't let the imagery just stay there. If your company is going into a new sector, go for it. Add some stuff in there. Don't neglect the homepage. We talked about that before with Luke, changing it. Keep it fresh. If you've got seasonal campaigns or trends, what's going on locally, or if you've got a huge campaign that you're wanting to push, update the site. It doesn't need to be forever. Just because you're changing it doesn't make it the new face of the site for the rest of its life. You're just putting something in the new hero. You're making some direct traffic to that area, and then you can revert back. Use it for A/B testing. And then if in doubt, ask us. Just because the site's been built and designed and passed over does not mean that we're out the picture. We're involved in the site, we're invested in the site, and we want it to thrive as much as you do. Once a site's been launched, we're constantly going back in and checking on it just to see how it's getting on, see if things have gone a bit funny, some images have got stretched, or something's gone on, or it's not being used to its full potential. But if you're thinking, I want to make changes to this, but I don't know, pick up the phone, drop a ticket, speak to us, and we'll always be able to help out, hopefully. And then if there's a page that doesn't exist and you need to create one, we've got full teams here ready to help. So hopefully that's covered enough of what I kind of do over here. And there is a bit of time, I think, for a Q&A if anybody has a moment.